Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 363. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this evening, usual cast of characters: Gail from Communities Digital News, nyfights.com, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing. We hope to have Daniel from 4 Boxing News and the Inscriber later on this evening. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hola.
Squeak, squeak, squeak. Dog toys and me all here.
Right. If you hear stuff in the background, don't worry about it. You've heard it in the past before. That's just Gail's boxers having a little fun in the background. So don't worry about that. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, as well as site/blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. If you want to find out all the information, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. Let me repeat that, p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us with questions, thoughts, suggestions, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you will find the links to where to find the show, all things regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, all over the social space, be it Facebook/Meta, be it Twitter, be it IG, Tumblr, the link to the YouTube page, also links to where you can find the show all over the podcast realm, be it Anchor, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Google Podcasts, anywhere, everywhere else in between. Links to where you can donate, Cash Me and PayPal donation links. Let donation be the best nation. If you have a little bit of spare change on hand, if you'd like to give some coin to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, will be greatly appreciated. It'll help the overall production behind the scenes. And also, last but certainly not least, link to the YouTube. Link to Beachbody on Demand. I'm still pushing that, even though I'm not a coach as of right now. Please check out Beachbody on Demand. We closing fast on the summer. If you're looking to get your health and wellness game up to par, looking to get your body right as we head into the summer. If you're looking for Beachbody on Demand, I should say, fitness programs for whatever you're interested in. If you're looking for a boxing-based program to be specific, I suggest you check out 10 Rounds, a 6-week program, 3 days a week. You do boxing-based cardio. 2 days a week, you do weightlifting. You get 2 days off per week, so it's really a good all-around program. And at the very least, take advantage of the 2-week trial, 14-day trial, and what that is. For 14 days, you get free access to Beachbody on Demand and all the programs there. Let's get things going. Recapping the big fight that took place this weekend. Took place at what I will forever call StubHub, Digital Health Sports Park, whatever the hell. StubHub is what I call it. The rematch between Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano for all the belts. Shout out to Olaf. He says howdy to everyone. Jermell Charlo, Brian Castano rematch. They fought previously July 2021. Um, the fight ended in a draw. More than a few folks felt that Castano did enough to win. Uh, Ran it back again this past last Saturday. I'll go to you, Gail, then I'll go to you, Jacob, since you were in attendance. Um, Fight went differently this time. It was a very good fight, I should say. Candidate for Fight of the Year, very competitive early, Gail, but I noticed in watching the fight once I hurried home from work, is that Charlo in the middle rounds, he kind of switched things up. Uh, in the first fight, he acknowledged that he didn't really listen to his trainer, Derek James. In this fight, he did, and you can see it in the middle rounds. Is not only that he keep up the jab, but he also began to employ outstanding footwork. I felt going around the punches of Castano, landing the jab, landing shots to the head and body, throwing more body shots in this fight than he did the first fight, and didn't get hit as much. It all paid off in the 10th round where he caught Castano with the left hook. I don't think Castano saw it, but when he got hit, bit of the delayed reaction, he crumbled to his knees. Uh, Charlo followed up and ended the fight. He's now undisputed at 154. I would argue the best performance of his career. Your thoughts?
100% agree with you. Best performance of his career. I think that Mel needs to really be pushed and motivated to be his best. He put on a terrific fight, although he got behind early in his rematch with Tony Harrison. And in a lot of ways, this fight reminded me of that rematch. When the stakes are high, things were looking against him, he rallies. I wish he wouldn't really teeter on the brink like that. And in a way, it's a little bit of a shame that he hasn't shown everything that he's got in the toolkit until now. But be that as it may, he got pushed by an opponent who was, styles make fights, as we say, very difficult for him. Credit to Castano. He's relentless. He's got a super chin, but it could only hold out so long because everything finally came together. And we have another unified champion. Due credit. For years, it was always whispered that, yeah, well, it's Jermell that's the better of the twins. I don't think I'd say that anymore. I think Jermell has had to work a little harder, and because of that, has surpassed his brother. And I like a little of the friendly rivalry that they have. I think that's also made them a lot better. The chip's still firmly on his shoulder, though, if you saw the post-fight news conference. And I'm okay with that. It was a super performance, and we've got to give just that little extra bit of credit to the venue. StubHub, Carson, the War Grounds, something about that place. And Jacob, you were there. You've been there many times. I've been there many times. If you're listening and you've never seen a fight in Carson, that is a bucket list must for anyone who considers themselves a boxing fan. And just there's something about it. Magic happens there, and it happened again Saturday.
Indeed, indeed. Ever since that venue opened up its doors to the sweet science, it's just something about it. Uh, be it watching it on television or you, Gail, and Jacob being at live events, there's something about about that place that produces terrific fights and does so on a consistent basis. Um, I can give my analysis from watching on television or watching on computer, I should say. Is That's one thing. I'll go to you, Jacob. You were in attendance. Talk about not the fight, the vibe. I think this was Charlo's best performance, but it's your perspective being ringside, being in the building, your impressions on the overall fight.
Yeah, I mean, lots to say about this fight. So first off, um, the first question that was this Charlo's best performance? I'm gonna say no. And the reason I say that, not that it was a bad performance, but he still I thought he was the bigger guy, or he looked bigger in the ring, but he let Castano keep on pushing him his back to the ropes, and Castano was, like you said, got a hell of a chin, but it wasn't going to hold out, after so many shots. But I give him a lot of props because he kept on coming forward. He was making the fight. He was kind of initiating the exchanges. But Charlo, in the first fight, he was really using his jab a lot more, to keep Castano at bay. And again, the jab is such an important punch to me because it sets up your other shots. Your combinations. It blinds your opponent. So Charlo has a decent jab, and he's the bigger guy, so I would have liked to see him kind of establish himself a little bit more ring generalship. I don't think that is playing to his better attributes. And what ends up happening in his fights is that, well, I feel like he gets behind and then he has to have his power kind of bail him out towards the end. Very reminiscent of Deontay Wilder. someone I think that loses a lot of like early rounds, but then his power ends up bailing him out. Besides Fury. But even the scorecards in this fight were a little kind of crazy. One judge only gave 1 round to Castano. Another one only gave him 2 rounds. I thought it was a much closer fight. I thought it was a better fight. The first 4 rounds were just crazy good. A lot of action. The crowd, the Argentinians were in full effect. I mean, they showed up for sure. But like I had said, I knew there was going to be a lot of Charlo fans there too. And Spence was there, and the people that they run with were there. So it was a pretty, I would say a pretty split crowd, maybe 60-40 Castano, if anything. But it was that's what makes that, I think, that venue so great, is when the crowd is really into it and you have that kind of split. I mean, we can probably rattle off a bunch of fights that have happened there, and there's definitely something in the water. I don't know, there's just something about that place that brings out these great fights and matchups, and like you said, consistently. But Charlo got it done. He did hit him with a shot, a left hand, kind of like down the a little bit down the pipe, a little bit like almost like a hook, but it hit Castano pretty square, and yeah, he had a delayed reaction. And I'm actually surprised that the ref let it go on, because when he got to his feet, he was, he was done. I mean, he was done, and he took a couple more shots, most notably an uppercut that made him look like a Pez dispenser, with his neck basically going all the way back. But I give a lot of credit to Castano, because, like I said, I think he made the fight. He was pushing the action. He wasn't afraid to. He was doing the thing that I love most, where he was trying to win, not the other thing, which is when boxers just try not to lose. I hate that style, when you're just like trying not to lose, but you're not trying to win. And he was definitely trying to win. I think he really believed in himself. And he after the fight, he even said he didn't have any excuses. He just said, "Hey, he caught me." He's like, they were asking, "What's the difference in the fight?" And he's like, I was doing good, but he caught me. So kudos to him. So I like that too. I like that there wasn't any bad blood or any excuses, because that's another thing that drives me up the wall. But yeah, great night of great main event.
Absolutely, 100%. I co-sign your last comments. The respect both men showed towards each other in the end, after a lot of heated bad blood and accusations in the lead up. Going to read this comment here from appreciate you checking us out live. If you're checking us out live here on YouTube or on tick delayed basis on YouTube, please hit that like button. If you're checking us out on the podcast realm, when I eventually get this podcast up, I know I'm behind. My apologies for that. Please make sure you subscribe to us on all podcast platforms. Olaf says here, agree with you, Gail. He says, although 154 is a pretty weak division, I think it's ripe for the taking of Crawford, Spence, Jaron, Boots Ennis, who we will talk about in a bit, wants to move up and relieve Charlo of his 4 belts. I'm going to use this to kind of segue into what's upcoming for Jermell, right? Afterwards, when he was asked about his future, he was more in a celebratory mood of celebrating the fact that he's undisputed champion, first undisputed junior middleweight champion, right? Tim Tszyu, who is WBO mandatory challenger, was in the house, as was the interim champion WBC. Help me out, Gail and Daniel. Tall, lanky, 6 foot.
Fundora.
Yeah, Sebastian Fundora. Both of those men were in attendance. As a matter of fact, Showtime interviewed both of them. He has those options, but there's also the possibility of him moving up to 160. His older brother, Jamal, current WBC champion at 160, and I wrote about this for 3kingsboxing.com. Please check out 3kingsboxing.com, your source for pure unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to the fellas there. Head of 3 Kings 2K. head of media relations, Bo, who you've heard on this podcast many times before, fellow senior writers, Bakare, Jarrell, aka Big Cool, and Red behind the scenes doing all the editing. Jamal, speaking to media afterwards, said that he wants his brother to move up to 160 pounds. He said he's tired of him getting down to that weight. He says in his fantasy world, Mel comes up to 160, Maul goes up and wins the title or so at 168 pounds. I'll begin the conversation with you, Gail. If you are Mel's handler, excuse me, would you go for, would you stay at 54 and defend the titles against either a Fandora or Tim Zoo, or would you wait things out and eventually begin the plans to move up to middleweight?
Well, he and his brother are going to have a sit down and figure out what they want to do. I'm not saying this is the same situation as the Klitschko brothers, but certainly doubt either of them wants to face the other. And family promises aside. But I don't think Mel gets to decide what Maul wants to do. And I imagine the dinner table conversation after that press conference might be a little tense at home. I'm not sure Maul moves up right now. You know, with Golovkin and Canelo having business at 160, depending on whether Maul's having trouble making the weight or not, which I don't know, you know, it clears a lane for him in a lot of ways. He's going to want to stick around. I think Mel's going to have to bide his time. He really should defend his belts at least once, you know, his unified belts at least once. You know, if he's ever going to take on a kid like Fundora, you know, the time might be now. Fundora was there dressed like he was looking to score a commentating gig after he finished his boxing. He's all tricked up in his suit.
Looking like he's about 15 years old.
He looked like he was going to the prom. Seriously, he did. It was hilarious. And his sister, who, you know, proportionally is just about as tall as he is, and she's a flyweight, for God's sakes, or she's a super flyweight, pardon me, at 5'9", which is crazy. You know, I mean, Jermell and Sebastian Fundora, I'm just laughing thinking about that, how crazy good that might be. You know, Jared Hurd's out there lurking around, sniffing. I do like the Tim Zoo fight a lot. And I think, again, you don't want to wait on these guys too long before they get a little more experience, you know, a little more tread on the tires and become a little more dangerous. So, you know, it seems to be a rare era in boxing where we've got a lot of dare to be great guys. And I say, Mel, go for it, man. It's not like he's protecting an O on his record. So I would admire the hell out of him taking on somebody like that. He's going to get mandatories if he just sits around and waits long enough. And maybe he wants to see what the sanctioning bodies have to offer. And if he perceives that one of them, you know, is easy, well, maybe he sits around and does that. But he's got time to wait. He does have to be concerned, though, because Earl Spence was sitting there. A lot of 147s were, you know, loitering around there. Carson, you know, he doesn't want to wait for either Spence or Crawford to prevail and then move up to 154 and say, I'm coming for you. And Earl more or less said, I'm coming for you. So, you know, he's got some plans to make. But, you know, let him enjoy it for at least a couple of weeks and we'll see what happens.
What say you, Jacob?
Actually, I mean, I kind of disagree a little bit. I think Jamal is, I mean, if he's looking for a fight, Canelo and Triple G, their next fight, if it's going to be fought, it's going to be at the super middleweight. It's going to be, I don't think we're ever going to see Canelo back at middleweight.
Right. That's my point, is they're out of the way. So there's no reason for Maul to move up. Now, you know, the problem is Jermell wants to move up. Jermell's already there at 160. With Golovkin and Canelo out of the way, you know, he becomes.
No, but I heard him talk. I heard him talk actually after the weigh-in, and he was I think he was saying so. I think what Jermell wants, and I think he could move up to. He is a big 260, and I think he could move up to 268. I think he wants, or he says he wants the big fights. So if
And he
Triple
needs the big
G,
fight. And he needs a big fight. And he needs a big fight.
Oh no,
His career is stagnated.
100%. His resume is weak as hell.
Well, there are fights he can go after at 160. I mean, I think he can do exactly what his brother did if he sticks around at 160. Mel wants him out of the way. I think that's going to be a very tangled mess for a while.
No, I think he wants to make room for his brother. He can get a fight with Triple G at 268. He can get a fight with Canelo at 268.
168. You're saying
168. 168. He can, and then he's got this. I know everybody knows about this, but him and David Benavidez have this big. They've got into it a couple times already, and so I know they've been both talking trash. So.
And Mel has gone on the record. And Mel has gone on the record. Excuse me for interrupting. Mel has gone on the record and says he wants to fight David Benavidez in 2023.
Yeah, so I mean he's at
Jermell, but not Jermell. So
Jamal. Excuse me. Jamal has said.
Right?
Jamal,
okay.
Jamal has said he wants to fight him in Benavidez in 2023. Excuse me.
Yeah, Benavidez is also at 168. So I mean, there's 3 big fights right there that he can get. And that I think will bring. Not only will it bring the crowd, but it'll bring some money, and I think, if anything, they want that money. And then with Jermell, I agree with Gail. I mean, I would like to see, like, when somebody becomes champion, especially unified champion, I'd like to see him defend, a couple times. But, if we're talking about accomplishments, I mean, he unified the division. He can go up to 160. And what is really there, like as far as possible competition, not a whole lot. So, he can maybe pick up a couple belts or maybe even try to unify that division. So I mean, it really just depends on a couple things. Like I think Gail pointed out is both of them having trouble making that weight? That's usually, a sign if when people are having trouble making weight, and it's probably the thing that boxers like to do the least is make weight, right? Especially if they're, trying to use that advantage to be the bigger guy and keep their, weight down so that they can be the bigger guy. But eventually that catches up to you, your metabolism changes, and, you just can't do it anymore. So I think the Fundora fight, I think it's a little bit too early for Fundora. I mean, I think a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, but maybe some forget, he wasn't like whooping Lubin. I mean, Lubin had him hurt and down at one point, but, I give him credit for coming back, but, he wasn't like blowing him away. That was a tough fight for him. And I think I'm not really sold on him completely. He obviously has this freakish, size and but I don't think he uses it to his advantage. And then the Zoo fight, I don't know. I don't really like that fight because I don't really think Zoo is that great. I wasn't really impressed with his last performance, and I don't know, but with the Charlo, you never know. He can basically keep you in the fight because of the way he fights. He kind of fights very passive and he doesn't really go for it. And like I said, he usually gets his power, or something happens towards the end to bail him out. And so, if I was those guys, of course, I'd want to get that fight because I can kind of maybe prey on that little bit of error I think that they make in his game plan.
I see Daniel has joined us. Daniel from NY. It's Daniel from 4 Boxing News and the Inscriber. I'm sure he's probably doing this while watching the Heat and Celtics game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Your quick thoughts on Charlo's stoppage win over Castano, as well as the discussion we're having right now in terms of what do you feel is the best move for Jamel Charlo moving forward?
Well, as far as the fight goes, it's actually was a fight that Castano controlled a lot of the pace in the beginning, and then Charlo was able to get to it in the end and slowed the pace down, and ultimately landed that short left hook, the same punch that took out Erickson Lubin. It's the same punch that took out Brian Castano, and he did it fairly well. He managed to get him at the pace that he wanted to get him, and you're not going to fault him for that. You can't fault him for that area. Castano was fighting fairly well. It's unfortunately it does catch up with you. Now, as far as how this is going to shape up, I think because of the situation where they got the rematch, Tim Tszyu does have the first shot. That would be interesting to see because, yeah, his U.S. debut didn't leave a lot to be desired. They're going to try to put this fight in Australia. You know they're going to try. They're going to throw as much money as they can if they go to purse bid to take this to Australia and have it be in the home crowd. Now, what else can he do at 154? Honduras there for the WBC, although that presents itself a different set of problems because Mel will not have an advantage either in height or in reach. But we have to see how it shapes up when it comes to those fights because 154 is it's getting a little bit washy right now. Tzyyu's, like I said, it's obviously next up. Honduras there. But we also have to see what the sanctioning bodies do. Because if we talk about it later on, they already stripped one undisputed away from the table. But more than likely, if I'm Mel, I just handle the Tszyu situation because that will be a lot of money. A lot of money coming in.
Strangely enough, I think that a lot of this depends on Spence Crawford. If when we see that fight, the indication is now strong. Indication is that fight is going to happen this year. Spence was at this event as well. He talked to Showtime. He says he believes it's going to happen this year. Steven Espinosa has said that they're working hard on this fight. Al Heyman has actually reached out to Crawford, right? So the signs are positive that we're finally going to see that fight this year. Let's just say it happens and Crawford wins. I think Mel will stay at 54, fight Tim Tszyu, in his mind, beats Tim Tszyu, and then tries to shoot for a fight with Crawford in 2023. Well, I'm talking about Mel. Hopefully try to shoot for a fight with Crawford in 2023. Should Crawford fight Spence and beat him. In terms of Maul, I think he has no choice to move up to 168 pounds because he's having issues making 160. He was overweight technically for his last fight. He was a quarter pound over the weigh-in. You see how big he is at 160. So he's not going to have any choice but to move up to 168 in the next 6 to 12 months. That's Maul. But for Mel, I think this is largely contended on Spence Crawford if that fight happens this year because Crawford is already going on the record says he wants Spence, and should he beat him, he's shooting straight for Jermell Charlo. So let's just see where it goes. But congratulations to Mel for the stoppage win, and once again he's undisputed junior middleweight champion. Let's move on. Talk about the undercard here. Let's talk about the undercard here. Excuse me, got some technical issues on my end. Jaron boots Ennis on the undercard fought what was an IBF welterweight eliminator against Custio Clayton. Look, Clayton, he looked shook when he got in the ring. Ennis stopped him in 2 rounds, hit him with an overhand hand right, put him down. He was wobbling when he got up. This is the simple question for everyone here. Look, I know he's not going to fight either Spence or Crawford anytime soon. Whoever wants to answer this question first off, please do. My question is, given what we've seen of Jaron Boots Ennis, is he ready to tangle with the likes of either Spence or Crawford? Because afterwards, he was talking about he's big game hunting. And by big game hunting, he's saying that he wants either Spence or Crawford. He wants him sooner than later.
I'd love to see him fight someone like Virgil Ortiz or somebody else, because I want to see the Spence Crawford fight. I don't want Spence to fight Boots, and I don't want Crawford to fight Boots next. I want them to fight each other. And so, in a perfect scenario, he would fight another contender, and then the winners can fight the winners.
Gail, Daniel, what say y'all?
Yeah, I'm a believer that if you want the top dog and you're competing with others at your level for the top dog, well, you sort it out among yourselves first and then present the obvious choice. You've sort of played your own elimination tournament first. I prefer to see that most of the time, and this is, one of those cases.
Before I go to Daniel, here's the follow-up question, though. Who's going to test this kid up until then? I mean, you got Thurman out there, but he's not going to fight him. No way. Virgil Ortiz, his situation is up in the air given the events that took place before his postponed fight. There's an issue now whether he could really make 147 pounds anymore. So I hear y'all, and I tend to agree with y'all. But given the immense talent that we've seen for Jaron Boots Ennis up until a proposed fight against Crawford, Spence, since I think he's mandatory contender, IBF now. Who's going to test him?
Yeah, he's going to end up being a mandatory. Listen, he's going to have to wait for Spence and Crawford to tangle, right? One of them's going to prevail. There's going to be somebody else who's going to need a fight. Maybe they all move up. Who knows? Then belts are vacant. So then he's got more of a lane in. He's certainly talent-wise. I am in no way comparing Boots, who is absolutely the goods. I mean, he looks better every time we see him. I am not comparing Boots to Zurdo Ramirez, but they both kind of have the same problem. The guys at the top have to sort it all out. The guys underneath are going to have to sort it all out, and eventually he'll get there. I hope he stays busy. I think like Zurdo, like this past weekend, we're going to see, a few more fights like that, unfortunately. But I'd rather see that than have them sitting on their ass out on the sidelines.
Hold up. Controversial comment here from Olaf. He says, why would Spencer Crawford want to take on this young lion and get torn to shreds in 2 rounds? They will stay away. They will stay far away from Boots. Way too risky for these guys.
Just what I was saying. You're absolutely right, Olaf. No, they don't want any part of that. Hell no.
No, I disagree.
A buzzsaw.
He fought a guy that landed 10 punches. That guy didn't do shit.
Yeah.
And Clayton's not a tomato can. Clayton, Custio fought his way to a draw in a fight he was supposed to lose. So, he had something to offer, but Boots just is the class of the division.
And one more comment before I go to you, Daniel. From MG, excuse me. He says, good weekend of fights. I want Spence versus Crawford next. Jaron can fight Stanionis, Butayev, Thurman, Jamal, James. I agree. The problem
is the fight to make, but I'll bet you anything he gets Thurman.
You're right. Yes, Thurman don't want it. And there are people behind him. Thurman is not going to put him in the ring. Jamal James, no. Boots takes him apart. Same with Butayev. And I would say he will beat Stanionis rather easily as well. I go to you, Daniel. Your thoughts?
Well, it was a pretty good showing. It was a really impressive outing when it comes to Boots. Like I said, he did what he was supposed to do, took out somebody in that front. As far as what's next, that all really depends, because while we all want, like in myself included, while we all want Bud and Spence to fight for undisputed, we all know there's always going to be some chicanery when it comes to sanctioning bodies. And I know we didn't talk about it much last week in the past couple of weeks, but with Manny Pacquiao is retiring from politics after that loss that he took in the presidential elections in the Philippines, and knowing that he's probably going to need a lot of money to maintain his foundations, I could really see him going back to the ring. I could even see him go back to Bob. And if he goes back to Bob, you know there's going to be some WBO shenanigans. And then suddenly you're going to have Manny versus Bud. If not Bud being stuck in court for the rest of the year. We have to see how that shapes up first. But as far as for Boots, the only way he's going to get it is going to be in the mandatory because he has mentioned a good amount of fighters that he gets. Steniosis would probably be the smartest fight to make. The only thing that I would probably see, because that's the only thing that's has me hedging my bets from having Boots be the top of the class is even though I don't think he can, I want to see if Virgil can safely make 147 again. If he can make one safely 147 again, the fight to make is him and Virgil, and that will probably erase the last bit of doubt I have with Boots, and that's his chin.
Jacob brought up another guy in our private chat, Ugas, Jordanis Ugas, who recently was stopped by Spence. That's a good option as well. The problem is, given the condition of his eye, because he suffered major eye damage in that loss to Spence, is going to be a while until he gets back in the ring. But yeah, this was an easy win. You could kind of see it as soon as Clayton stepped in the ring. He looked like the moment was just way too much for him. Just deer in headlights almost. And Ennis took advantage and just took him out with ease, didn't even break a sweat. And at the very least, he's on the precipice, he's on the cusp of a world title shot. He has the ability, he can compete at the very least. He can compete with Spence. He can compete against Crawford. I wouldn't say he beats them right now, but he can compete with them, and that's all that you can ask for with him at this point. Let's move on to
But
some other.
just one more thing, Mike. I just think it is important that he did what he's supposed to do, but it's also important that he gets good competition when you're going after top guys like Crawford and Spence, because still sharpens still, in my opinion. You can have the best gym, training camp as possible, but if you're just running through guys, that doesn't prepare you for the the adversity that you might face fighting somebody like a Crawford or Spence. So I think it would be better for him to fight, not go after the top guy right away. I think there's plenty of guys for him to fight to test him and hope maybe even push him to some of adversity so that we can see, what is this guy made of? What is he?
Absolutely right. Oh, I absolutely agree, and ultimately, you're right as far as that. To cut down on some time here, I'm going to split these next fights up between all of y'all. And where do I want to go? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to go? I go to you on this one, Daniel, since you joined in late. I had the pleasure of interviewing Gilberto Ramirez, myself, and both from Three Kings Boxing. Um, Interviewed him a little over a week ago, leading up into this recent fight against Dominic Boesel, took place in Ontario, California. Uh, Mandatory status for the WBA at 175 was on the line, and you got to give credit to Ramirez. He did what he had to do against an opponent who was clearly better than. Took him out in four. Uh, Pretty easy work as far as I'm concerned, and you can talk about the fight you want, but my question moving forward, given what Bivol did to Canelo, what do you think of a possible fight between Zerto Ramirez and Bivol? Let's just say, assuming that Bivol doesn't get the rematch with Canelo Alvarez later on this year.
Well, it puts Bivol in a very familiar situation, which is him being the smaller guy in between those fights. And what's interesting when it comes to Zurdo is that he, like I said, it's not just the height, it's the reach, it's the fact that Zurdo kind of knows that in order to get the actual payday, we know, like you mentioned it, Canelo's the actual payday. And to force that hand, make him see if he lives true to that statement, he's gonna have to take that challenge because in the meantime, the unfortunately light heavyweight right now, other than Beterbiev and obviously Beterbiev and Joe Smith, not a lot of room when it comes to contenders. Now, the only fight I could see that's a go between it would probably be a good proxy fight in a way would be him versus Calvin Smith because they both present different types of problems in that front. But like I said, if you don't get it, Bivol can outbox him, but he's not going to have the advantage that he had with Canelo, where Canelo was really the smaller guy coming in. He's going to be facing a guy that's taller than him, probably has more range than him, and more than likely has a bit of power, a little bit more power than Bivol does. And we've seen Bivol get rocked before, and if he gets into his normal malaise, it doesn't work well.
Let's take it over to France, Gail. In the aftermath of the 2016 Olympic Games, Tony Yoka, to many, was thought to be as kind of the guy to keep an eye out on. Yoka won the super heavyweight gold medal. Um, his career was paused when he was suspended for failing to make a drug test or not attending or missing drug tests, whatever is the case. Seemed to get his career back on track, signed a co-promotional deal with Top Rank. In 2021, he publicly stated he was looking to fight a top 15 guy. He got that opportunity this past weekend against Martin Bakole. And yeah, if you're a Yoka fan, you have to be wondering what happened because not only did Tony Yoka lose his bout, he got beat up, put down in the first round. It was technically called a knockdown in round 5, though. It was more of a case of Yoka reacting, going down after turning his ankle over. But he was bleeding badly from the nose. Bakole came in at nearly 280, but just overpowered Yoka and had him on the retreat towards the last few rounds of the fight. I was personally surprised by this. Were you?
I was not completely. I thought Tony Yoka would run into somebody like Bakole, but I didn't think it was going to be Bakole. But talk about seizing your opportunity. He was not going to let this get by him. He stepped on the gas from the minute the opening bell sounded, and I think he caught Yoka completely by surprise, and he could never recover. And Tony Yoka has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way over the years. As you mentioned, he's kind of fudged getting mandatory drug tests done. He took a lot of heat for once again, surprise, a disputed Olympic outcome, winning a gold medal over the opponent everyone assumed had won, Joe Joyce. So a lot of heat, a lot of very bad feelings over that. Top Rank does love their Olympians. I'll tell you what, they spot a gold medalist, they sign them, and they do have a knack for promoting them. But in this case, Yoka, whether he came in unprepared, unaware, just got caught on a bad day, he was pretty gracious after the fight. But there are a lot of people who, frankly, danced on Mr. Yoka's grave. And, I will also say probably in this world not all that easy to be a French heavyweight. So there was that. But yeah, I didn't expect him to get taken out like that. And at a certain point of the fight, he just seemed to just stop trying. He could have, in theory, battle his way back. And we have seen a lot of fighters do that, but it doesn't really speak well for him. And at some point, he just sort of mentally cashed it in and, let it happen to him. And props to Bakole. He was elated, he was emotional, and he earned that victory.
And that's the disturbing part if you're a Yoka fan, not just the physical punishment he took, but how he mentally checked out at some point. He just stopped trying, fought to survive instead of fighting to try to get a win and go for the gusto. And some serious reevaluation must happen now. And again, shout out to Bakole. He'll move up the rankings right now. I would like to see him fight Filip Hrgović next. If that fight could be made, that would be fantastic. Put it on the zone. But really, really surprising result. As I said before, we had a couple of comments here before we go on to some other fights from Yola. Shout out to MG. Shout out to Yola. Please keep the comments and the questions coming. He said in terms of our last discussion about Boots, he's in Zerto. He said he wasn't impressed with Zerto. His punches are wide and his defensive was loose. I think Bivol and Canelo will pretty much have an easy time with him. Not the Canelo that fought the last time out. Zerto, the way he fought against Bivol, Zerto will give him trouble, respectfully. And also he says in terms of Ennis, in terms of Yoka, he says that Yoka is pretty weak heavyweight, kind of undersized, weak punching power, no heart. Not much there that can compete with the top large heavies. You're certainly right giving up for this fight. So yeah, a lot of questions has to be raised coming off of that win and how he looked. And he also said, lastly, in terms of Boots, he reiterated his appraisal of Boots. He says he thinks that Boots Ennis washes anyone at 147 or 154 within a couple of rounds. He's clearly the best talent in the game based on eye test, once in a generation talent. I agree with his talent, but again, to Jacob's point, let's see him get tested a little bit before we suggest that he just makes easy work, particularly the likes of Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence. Let's move on to talk about some more fights here. Give me a second, doing some adjustments here. I'll go to you, Jacob, to talk about this last recap on the docket here, and that is the return of Sergey Kovalev. Last time we saw him in the ring was on November 19th. He got stopped in 11 rounds by Canelo, losing his WBO 175-pound belt in the process. Been away. We talked about it last week. Had his histories of issues outside of the ring. Got back in there against Tervel. Pulev, cruiserweight. His debut at cruiserweight fight took place on Triller. Kovalev, I thought Pulev would do a little bit more damage, given the fact that he's the bigger guy, given the fact that he has a reputation as a big puncher, Jacob. But Kovalev basically controlled this fight with the jab. That's really all he needed for this fight. Pulev had no answers for that left-hand stick. Dan Rayfield went on social media to say he felt Kovalev did look good. I disagree. Given how poorly Pulev fought, that fight was pretty meh to me. The whole event was just a thumbs down. Fight came on way too late, but that's just ancillary issues. If you were able to see the fight, your impressions of Kovalev and his debut at cruiserweight, and does he have a future in that division?
I mean, I just saw highlights of the fight. I think and by the time I got home, I noticed it still wasn't over, and the event was still going on. So yeah, I did start super late. I think the main fight came on like after 10 or something crazy like that. Yeah, I mean, I think Kovalev is done. I mean, I just don't think he has it anymore. I think that time has passed. I mean, all he can really do is potentially be a stepping stone for, or get some paydays because he is a name in that division, in the cruiserweight division. But I don't think he's going to do anything, spectacular or get back to his the heights that he had before. He's always had a problem with, I think, a little bit of discipline, outside the ring. We've heard all the stories of things that have happened, and, I'm sure, they'll still give him a fight because he is a name. He'll always be able to fight, somewhere like, whenever Russia opens up again and all that. But, I mean, I don't know how many people were even at that event. It seemed like it was a pretty, not a great event, and not something that I don't see the Trilla kind of sticking around for a long time. I mean, we've seen the likes of a Jay-Z or, all these other promotion companies try to do what, Top Rank and PBC has been able to do, but it's hard. It's not easy, especially in the politics with boxing and the belts, the judges, scorecards, all these different things. Fighters not making weight, blah blah blah. But I don't really care to really see him again. That time was past to me, and but he probably won't quit.
I noticed you put in the private chat you did see the fight. I was purposely didn't want to have you discuss it, Gail, given your history with Kovalev. But if you do,
I will weigh in. I don't know what the hell fight Dan Raphael was watching. I did see all of his comments on social media and in his newsletter, Fight Freaks Unite.
I'm like, okay,
Kovalev,
I'm like, okay.
what?
That's
Yeah,
what you think. Okay.
Kovalev is back. Really? First of all, since it was his first fight at cruiserweight, so let's point out that he weighed 200 pounds, and he looked it. I mean, it appeared to me he was slow. He admitted being rusty. He didn't exactly have somebody burning it up across from him. So he prevailed. Okay, fine. The fight was greatly delayed because the co-main fight featuring Kubrat Pulev and Jerry Forrest was delayed because Forrest showed up and had gloves that didn't fit him. What the hell happened there? He had no gloves. So, of all things, Pulev lent a pair of his backup gloves to Forrest, his opponent. Never heard such a thing in my life. So they salvaged the fight, but by now 45 minutes plus has gone by, and we're waiting again. That fight did not, the Kubrat Pulev Forrest fight didn't even ring walk until I believe it was something like 1:15, maybe later Eastern time. The Kovalev fight went off at like 2 a.m. Eastern time. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Triller has got to manage their program a whole hell of a lot better if they're going to attract people. And they do have a hybrid, entertainment model that has something to offer. Their Trillerverse, music offerings tend to be really good, and it does draw a crowd. The problem is that went off before the co-main and the main event. And I think a lot of the folks that were there stuck around for that, and then they're out. So I don't think we'll get any attendance figures. The big news really from this card is that Evander Holyfield's son, who was seen as a very promising rising prospect, got knocked the F out face first by a kind of a no-name opponent who was 6-5. Clocked the kid. I mean, there was no doubt. To his credit, Holyfield got to his feet, but yeah, he was wobbling around like a newborn calf. So I wasn't going to go anywhere, and it did get stopped as well. It should have. He is going to need to go back to the drawing board. That was a very, very ugly, shocking loss for young Holy.
Yeah, I'll read this comment here before we go on into the news. From Olaf, he says that Kovalev fights uh, like he's sparring with teammates in the gym, just pokes with his jab, zero power shots thrown. He's got old man Hopkins power now. How was
You're
Kovalev?
so right,
How was
Olaf.
Kovalev such
Yeah.
a KO guy back in the day?
I blamed it
Yep.
on the extra weight versus the age, but it might have been both.
He also says that Kovalev still has enough to beat Makabu, who is WBC champion at cruiserweight. But he says Okoli, who's WBO champ, would dramatically KO him if Okoli actually lets loose with his hands, because you know how I feel about him and his fighting style. That being
He's
said,
had a couple of good fights lately, so go easy on your man Okoli. Yeah, the word.
he probably, but he probably at this point I agree he would beat
he
Kovalev.
But it
Olaf,
is the word that Kovalev wants to go after Makabu. Everyone wants Makabu because he's the perceived weak link in the cruiserweight division.
yeah, and Olaf went on to say that that was such a boring fight. Pulev was just flat out awful. Kubrat Pulev, who was the brother of Tervel Pulev and was doing the corner work, he said that Kubrat did a good job in that fight though. So yeah, we will see what Kovalev does moving forward. I look, I am critical of his performance. I don't care what Rayfield says. That was not a comeback. He's not back in any way. Certainly not to what he was at his best at 175. But he got the win. He does have a future at cruiserweight. And if they work him right behind the scenes and put him in the right fights, I could see him in 6 months to a year getting a world title shot. That's just being honest about the whole situation. Let's move on to some news here. Get this started with you. Let's get everybody into this particular news segment here. I wrote about this for Three Kings Boxing. Um, Situation involving now unified junior welterweight champion Josh Taylor. One, he's no longer WBA champion. Uh, Now, the reasons behind that, just it depends on who you believe. Do you believe the WBA, which released a statement saying that they stripped Taylor of the belt for not obliging, for not fighting an obligated mandatory defense, a defense against mandatory challenger Puello from Puerto Rico? Do you believe the sanctioning body, or do you believe the fighter himself, who went on social media in aftermath and said that he gave up the belt voluntarily, reached out to the WBA and said, you want it, you got it. You want the belt, y'all can have it back. That's one part. That was yesterday. Today, Todd DeBuff, president of Top Rank, during an interview with Sky Sports Boxing, disclosed that Taylor is in negotiations for a fight against WBC mandatory contender Jose Zepeda. So, thoughts on just Josh Taylor? Period. My main question is, given his last fight against Catterall, how he struggled there, openly talked about he's strongly considering moving up to 147. Are you surprised, Daniel? It will start the conversation with you. Are you surprised that Taylor, at least for one more fight, is staying at 140 pounds?
No, I'm not surprised in one end because this is an in-house fight. As you know, Cepeda's promoted by Top Rank. So obviously, with Taylor being promoted by Top Rank, it's a good in-house fight to make. Now, the only question that I have is, who is the WBA mandatory affiliated with? Is he a Golden Boy fighter? Is he a Heyman fighter?
I forgot offhand. I have to look back in my article. No, not a Heyman fighter, not a Golden Boy fighter either. I can't remember the name, the promotional name offhand.
Okay, but then that means that then you cannot take the politics out of you can take the politics out of it then at that point. But if I remember correctly, didn't the WBA try to say that they were also leaning towards making Taylor fight Catterall again? And we all know what happened last time he fought Catterall. So there could be that. And there's also probably the fact that the promised fight probably for Taylor, which was Bud, is probably not likely going to happen. So you can knock out the mandatory with Zepeda. Whether he wins or loses, that pretty much works out whatever way you want to do it, because Top Rank's going to win either way. If Taylor wins, like he solidifies himself before he goes up to welterweight. If he loses, then you still have all your belts still in house with Zepeda. So it's an interesting play with the WBA. Apparently, all the sanctioning bodies, particularly WBCs, are kind of mad with the WBA right now regarding how mandatories are supposed to be handled. But it's probably an expected move, and probably for Taylor and Taylor's people, I think a fight 140 makes sense as long as it wasn't Jake Catterall again.
And there's some issues with Jack Catterall, who you would have thought that given the controversial nature of his defeat to Taylor, that the BO in particular would have kept him at number one contender. He's not WBO mandatory contender now, so that's some strange developments there. I'll go to you, Jacob. You can follow up to my question that I asked Daniel. Thoughts on the WBA stripping Taylor, and more importantly, Taylor's apparent decision to stay at 140 pounds, at least for the immediate future.
I mean, Taylor, in all intents and purposes, said that he was going to vacate the belts and move up. So, him being stripped, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think he should move up to 147, especially based off his last performance. But I just don't think. I think he's too small to move up to that weight. I think this is his best weight, but he definitely has some things to work on, because his last performance wasn't very good. But if he thinks he can use his last performance and perform at a high level at 147, he's in for a rude awakening. Maybe we should give him the boots and we'll see what happens. But I don't know. So, I understand that these guys want to chase big names, big money, big fights. That seems to be kind of the trend right now. It's not about staying in your division, cleaning it out, staying at that weight. But, hey, what's the biggest fight I can make? What's the most money I can make? And, set myself up. Now I'm all for that if they actually do it, and retire and stay retired and manage their money well. But what ends up happening is these guys make a bunch of money, but then, they retire too late. They get all, busted up, and then, they still need money because they didn't manage it well, and they end up having to come back or doing these other fights. So hopefully he's smart about it.
Your thoughts on this, Gil?
Yeah, as we've said earlier in the show, I like to see unified title holders defend at least once. But right after, his last fight, Taylor said, I'm having trouble making weight. I'm going to move up. So I anticipated that in his case, he was just not going to be able to do it. Yeah, I think Zepeda is the most interesting fight. I wouldn't call him the highest level opponent, but he's by far the most entertaining opponent. And, it just shows that the sanctioning bodies bend their rules, from division to division. None of us as journalists, as media, as fans can go anywhere and read a set of rules. If this happens, then this happens. If this, in this case, it's It's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. So, I do want to see him defend. I'm disappointed that there's not a lot there for him right now. Zepeda is as good a solution as any, I suppose.
Right, and in terms of style, Zepeda, he's a dangerous dude. He has skills, and more importantly, he can punch. We all remember the fight against Baranchik that took place in, what was it, October of 2020. One of the fights of the year for that year. Certainly the knockout of the year. Knockdown, drag out, classic, right? How many knockdowns was it? 8 total between both men. And the thing is that Taylor is not a boxer in the truest sense. He fights mid-range doesn't have the greatest jab, and Zepeda will be a live dog, so it'll be an interesting fight. And yeah, I'm a little surprised that Taylor's decided to stay at 140 for one more fight. I thought he would just like vacate and just survey the scene and wait everything out and then just have a interim fight just to stay busy. But if they want to fight Zepeda, good luck on them. It's an in-house fight, as both guys are promoted by a top rank. And should it happen, should the negotiations get finalized, look for it to happen later this summer. Let's move on here, and just an open discussion for everyone, open issue for topics, I should say, for everyone. It's been largely assumed that Claressa Shields and Savannah Marshall will fight each other next. Both were successful as in what was really a setup fights for them. Shields won by decision. I want to say her fight took place in February, where Marshall, she knocked out her opponent in March or April. I want to say March. I could be wrong, but anyway, it all seemed that they were going to fight this summer, but now that fight may be delayed. Marshall had to have a surgical procedure for undisclosed injury. Just leaving it out there based on your sources, Gail, Daniel, Jacob. Do you have any kind of update on Marshall and her condition, and any word on when this fight will eventually take place?
I have no specific information. I think you unfortunately have to take a fighter at their word when there's news of an injury, at least at first. And this is not a fight where either of the women should go in at less than their best. This is a absolute high-level grudge match, years in the making. Disappointing, very disappointing to think there's going to be a delay. I don't think it's a fatal delay. Neither of these women is aging out particularly. It's not like we've got one of these marinating situations that becomes a Mayweather Pacquiao. It's nothing like that. So, I would rather see them both at 100% than try to fulfill, somebody else's idea of a timeline. Hopefully we'll get a little more word, a little more detail about where this is all going.
Let's move on to begin to cut a little bit of time here. Try to make the show as short as possible. Try to get it in under 90 minutes. Let's move on and preview some fights here. Going to go back to you, Gail. Doubleheaders taking place this coming Saturday on ESPN. As the headliner of this is Janibek Alimkhanuly. We've talked about him before. Rising middleweight contender. I personally, from what my film observation of him, I like him a lot. But if you follow him on Twitter, he talks a lot. He tweets a lot. He's basically stated that he is the now and the future of this division. With Demetrius Andrade, who was WBO champion at 160 pounds. Was supposed to move up to 168 to fight Zach Parker, but he suffered an injury. I think it was a shoulder injury. He's going to be on the shelf for a few months. So the WBO has ordered that Alimkhanuly fight Danny Dignum for the interim title, interim WBO belt at 160 pounds. I'll go to you on this one, Gil. For me, if Alimkhanuly is the fighter I think he is, he wins. He's a southpaw who can fight, who can punch. He has boxing skills. When he's on it, I love his abilities to work to the body. I've been very, very impressed with him. I'm not saying he's the future of the division, uh, but there were other fighters who could have taken this bout. Most notably, Jaime Munguia. De La Hoya said no. There's another Brazilian fighter by the name of Falcao said no. To me, that indicates that they know that that Alimkhanuly is a real talent. I think that talent will show itself once again against Dignum this coming Saturday.
I do think he's got a lot of promise. The future of the division, the middleweight division, in capital letters, it's a little bit early to be saying something like that. But
Right.
he is fun to watch. He goes about his business. He gets down to business. Um, he's an odds-on favorite. I think the last odds I read of this fight is that he's minus 1,000 and Dignum is plus 500. So, you gotta give just an idea. Yeah, I get it that you see an 11-0 record for Alimkhanuly and a 14-0 record for Dignum. They're not equivalent. Trust me, they're not equivalent. It's the problem that a lot of the Eastern European fighters have. They need to build up familiarity with English speaking audiences. He's doing a lot better in that, but it took Golovkin a long time too. The guys coming on behind Golovkin are having it a little easier because we all now know the talent that we see out of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and these guys given a chance are very, very entertaining. I think Janibek wipes the floor with Dignum. And, shame on me that when we were talking earlier about potential for fights at 154, 160, 168, Alimkhanuly is definitely in the mix there. Unfortunately, it's the risk versus reward problem because right now, not enough people in the U.S. or North America or the Mexican American Latino crowd know him. So he's not going to sell tickets, and he's too dangerous for a guy to take him on right now because they just aren't going to generate enough revenue from a fight. However, this was a very smart move by Top Rank to put him on as the main event. Even if it's a 3 or 4 round fight, give him a platform. Get a lot of other guys on the undercard that we do know. Some of their Olympians. Return of Jamel Herring, very smart. Because it's Jamel that's going to sell a lot of the tickets this weekend. And get some more eyeballs on him. And I think people will like what they see. But he's not going to have any trouble this weekend, not one bit.
I agree wholeheartedly. On the undercard here, Daniel Gale mentioned the return of Jamel Herring. Last time we saw him, he was on the losing end against Shakur Stevenson. Herring losing his WBO title at 130 pounds. He's moving up in weight to 135, fighting Jamaine Ortiz. More than the opponent himself, the interesting backstory is that Bomac is no longer his trainer. He's being trained by Manny Robles now. How do you think not just the fight will go, but the adjustment to a new trainer?
Well, my adage is always that whenever you switch trainers, it's going to take a minimum of 3 fights to fully adjust to what that trainer is going to do. What's interesting about this case is that he's jumping on so soon after that loss to Stevenson. Now, Ortiz is going to be a pretty interesting challenge for him because, unfortunately, when it came to Jamel, it hasn't always been the power that saved him. It's always been a little bit more of his skill set and the way he handles ring generalship that has led to a lot of the victories he's had. The only problem, unfortunately, that's going to be in this case is the same thing we mentioned. Yeah, it's not as drastic as what they had with Kovalev, but it's still like how much is the added weight going to factor into it, especially when you're coming in so soon after a loss like that way you took it to Stevenson. It'll be interesting to see because, especially when it comes into a fighter like Robles, a fighter that's trained with somebody like Robles, see how much of a different style it's going to bring, particularly if he's going to be a little bit more offensive minded or if he's going to more perfect his defense a little bit more under Manny. We have to see.
You're on mute, Mark, if you're talking.
Sorry. Thanks, Jacob. I was on mute. I don't think the move up to 135 will have that much of a role. He was able to make 30 pounds, but only because of the strength and nutrition, because of the nutrition program that he embarked on. I think he's going to feel better, honestly, being able to eat a little bit more, and I think he'll probably be stronger at the higher weight. I just want to see how he looks. And again, the interaction between him and the new trainer coming up. I'll go to you, Jacob. That fight is happening on ESPN. Um, Also, that night, you have the return of David Benavidez. Many people feel that he's the boogeyman at 168 pounds. We mentioned him a little bit while talking about the Charlo brothers. We all know the deal with him. Uh, has talked about fighting Canelo. He's hunting for a big fight, but in the interim, he's fighting David Lemieux. Gail and I took place in a Zoom call with Lemieux and Benavidez a couple of weeks ago for Showtime. And just like I think if Alimkhanuly is the fighter that he is, he should handle Dignum here. Look, I know Lemieux has power, but he's moving up from 160 pounds. And I just think that Lemieux, with his size, with his work rate, his length, and his youth, I just think that he will be just too much for David Lemieux. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that Benavidez is gonna fuck him up pretty much. Lemieux was, probably top 10 at middleweight when he was there in his prime, but he doesn't really have, I would say, a notable top level win for a long time. And I know he's had trouble making weight. I know he missed weight really badly when he was fighting at middleweight, but I want to say a couple times. But yeah, I think Benavidez is definitely probably the class of that division. I would love to see him fight, somebody worthy of his skill set. But again, the problem is that he has a tough time getting fights. Not a whole lot of people, I don't think, want to get in the ring with him because the risk reward isn't there. I mean, kind of like, damn it, if he wouldn't have done the coca and kept his belt, then Canelo would have had to fight him to become unified super middleweight champ. So that's kind of a missed opportunity there. But I have always wanted to see him. I thought the Caleb Plant, when they were talking shit to each other, Caleb Plant and Benavidez fight would have been an interesting one. I wanted to see that, but I haven't heard from Plant.
Plant don't want it.
Well, I haven't heard from Plant ever since Canelo fight, so I don't know. Maybe he's doing the Maidana and spending that money. Yeah, I mean, hopefully. I'm glad that Benavidez is staying active, because that's like one of the worst things I think for a boxer is if, you can do all the gym you want, but it's nothing's like a real fight. So, you need to get those rounds in. You need to, You don't want to atrophy. You need to stay active. So if this is a fight that he gets, it is what it is. Hopefully he can do what he needs to do and get another fight, a meaningful fight pretty soon. Maybe Charlo.
Yeah, let's hope so. Like I said, during our discussion about Jamel and Maul said that he wants to fight Benavidez in 2023. Shout out to previous regular pound for pound boxing report, Corrupt Gus, aka Corruption in Boxing. He said, going back to our discussion about Charlo's win over Castano, he says that Castano lacked the zip/acceleration in his footwork to get to the inside, and thus Charlo was setting up a trap to make Brian leap in, slip, and counter all night long. I understand your argument. That's a very good point. Because the way that Castano was able to get inside the reach of Charlo that first fight, he was not able to do it this fight. So that's a good analogy right there. Let's move on. Daniel, to talk about some more fights here. Excuse me, right quick. Let me check my schedule. Over in No, I'm going to you on this one, Gail. I'm going to you on this one, Gail, to talk about this next fight, and that is Joshua Buatsi, highly ranked 175 pounder, one of the high profile, one of the main guys on the Matchroom boxing stable, right? Um, Highly thought of by Eddie Hearn. He makes his return to the ring. Also, this upcoming weekend fight, Craig Richards. Your thoughts on that, please?
We have to look in the rearview mirror at the fight between Dimitri Bivol and Craig Richards, because Richards took Bivol the distance. He didn't batter him, he didn't beat him up, but he gave a very good accounting of himself, which surprised a lot of people. And
kind of close in that fight.
It was decisively Bivol's fight, but uncomfortably close on the cards. And I'd have to take a look and review the scoring to recall what it was. And I will look that up. It was the blame was put on to Bivol for a lackluster performance. But, in retrospect, now that we saw Bivol's performance against Canelo, you look at what Craig Richards did and think, maybe Craig Richards pushed Bivol a lot harder than we think versus Bivol just simply taking it easy. Well, we're going to get to find out this weekend. And, I think that we might be surprised. I am not favoring Richards to win, but I do think he'll push Buatsi, and that is exactly what he should do. And Buatsi should, absolutely take up the challenge. I'm going to retreat here and say that the fight, actually, now that I'm looking at the scoring, was a hell of a lot closer than I thought. It was a fight in the UK, so there was a little home cooking involved. Still, there was one fight that was one of the cards was 118-110 for Bivol, but the other two were 115-114 and 115-113. Now, where we got a point added on, I'm not quite sure. So while it was a unanimous decision for Bivol, two of those cards were uncomfortably close. So we're going to find out exactly what we've got here with Buatsi. He's got a lot to offer. Light heavyweight is a very lively division all of a sudden. There's a lot of players right at the top, but eventually, the next generation, of which Buatsi is one, is going to want to come out to play. So he's 15-0 with 13 knockouts, but at this point, he has not faced any significant opposition. Probably his best fight to this point was before the pandemic. He faced a pretty pretty worn out Marco Antonio Parabon at Madison Square Garden on an undercard. Since then, he's kind of sailed through, and he is an Eddie Hearn favorite. So it's been a little like Boots Ennis, right? It's time for him to step up and show what he's got. And we'll see what Craig Richards has to offer and how much resistance. I'm very intrigued by this fight because it might be a blowout, but I won't know until I see it. So I want to see it. So that gives us an early card also for those of us in the U.S. And who doesn't like some early boxing on a Saturday before we get around to seeing the rest of the events on our shores? So much to recommend there, and it is a DAZN fight.
I omitted the fact that Alimkhanuly and Dignum, Herring, Ortiz, that's going to take place in Las Vegas. That's going to be on ESPN once again.
And let me add just quickly on the undercard, you have Chantelle Cameron has got a title defense fight against Victoria Bustos. That will be a very good fight at super lightweight. And we also have the return of, he's a guilty pleasure, and I admit it, Alan the Savage Babic of Croatia. I want that all Croatian showdown with Filip Hrgovic. But until then, he's going to take on Adam Balski, and Babic is just damned entertaining.
Alimkhanuly, Dignum, that's going to be in Las Vegas on ESPN. Herring, Ortiz on that undercard. I didn't mention that the Benavidez Lemieux fight is going to happen in Phoenix, Arizona, Benavidez' hometown. That's going to take place on Showtime. This current fight with Buatsi and Richards is going to take place in London on DAZN. You mentioned it, Gail. The main undercard, for as I'm concerned, is Chantelle Cameron, who is BC IBF Women's Junior Welterweight Champion. She's going to take on former lightweight champion Victoria Bustos. I'm going to you, Daniel. I purposely left you last to discuss this because I know you got one eye on the Miami Heat and just their heck of a comeback here in the third quarter. Game one of the Eastern Conference Finals against Boston. They were down double digits in the first half, and man, did they storm through in the third quarter. They're now up double digits at the end of the third. So I want to give you some time to check that out. If you divert your attention from that, your thoughts, your analysis of Chantelle Cameron, her return to the ring to defend her unified 140-pound titles against Bustos.
Oh, this is going to be fun. That is going to be a fun fight. First, I have to give complete props to Chantelle Cameron. She tried. She was rebuffed. Unfortunately, it is the BC. And we know, unfortunately, Mauricio's feelings on when it comes to this, but she has tried to make this fight 3-minute rounds. Unfortunately, like I said, more than likely the BC said no. So this is going to be, like I said, 10 rounds, I think 2-minute rounds. But this is going to be a very interesting fight. Like I said, Bustos has fought fairly well, has a really good record. The last loss was against Cecilia Brækhus, but that was at the point like where Brækhus was still at her somewhat prime. This is going to be a very interesting fight, and they're both, like I said, I think she's either in the camp or adjacent to the camp of Katie Taylor. So she knows that she has to really, really make a statement over what could be the overall fight of the year already between Taylor and Serrano, let alone like the fight of the year for the women. So we have to see how she's going to show up. She's done fairly well on her defenses. Hopefully, like I said, she can push again for the 3-minute rounds. But this is going to be a little bit of a barn burner of a fight because Bustos is also, she'll let it go when she has to. It's going to be fun.
Indeed. And see, I'll put up Gus's comment again. He's talking about Craig Richards, the opponent for Buatsi in London. He says Craig Richards is decent and a huge 175-pounder at 6'4" should be competitive. You can check out Gus and his venture, Coup d'etat boxing. Excellent YouTube page, breaking down, giving detailed analysis and breakdowns of fights. I do have a request, Gus. Could you mention that Richards Buatsi fight on the next episode, either a preview or recap. That's just one small request, and I think we're going to start to shut down um, things on that note. I want to thank Gus. I want to thank Olaf. I want to thank MG for their comments and questions here on the live show. He also says one more thing. He says that Babbage is crude, barroom brawler. Hergovich demolishes the jumping around. Um,
Yes, and Gus, yes, he is. But
Yes.
he knows exactly who he is. He makes no apology for it. He puts on a show, and boxing is entertainment. So I'm not looking to Babbage for craft. I am looking for him to just flat out entertain me, make me laugh, make me say, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that shit I just saw." That's it. If I want craft,
yeah,
I'm watching Chocolatito. I'm watching Dimitri Bivol. For flat out just sit back with a drink. It's Babbage the Savage.
Yep.
indeed, indeed.
But I
If you
plan
like,
to watch Ice
go ahead.
Wars this weekend too. So there is that.
If you like what you've heard this evening, be it live or for those who are checking us out, who will check this show out later on, uh, hit that like button if you're checking us out on YouTube. Make sure do us a favor and hit that follow. If you're checking us out on the podcast realm, going to go around the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first, of course. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News and Wi-Fi's for those who want to talk the sweet science. For those who want to learn a little bit more about the media game, or for those who want to check you out on an occasional basis on TMZ Live, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Well, first of all, thank you to those who did make comments and share their observations in the chat. Olaf, Gus, we love it, and you make us sharper and better. I'm still not going to apologize for loving Alan Babbage, though. I am a well-rounded fight observer. I like it at the high end and I like it at the low end. Variety is the spice of life. I write for nyfights.com with our small but mighty team. I also am still corresponding for Communities Digital News, which is comdiginews.com.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks for joining us. I'll go to you, Jacob. Jacob from Jackpot Boxing. For those who want to talk sweet science. For those who want to talk TV and film with you, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, as always, thanks to the panel and thanks for you having me on, Mike. And shout out to Gus. I hope you're doing good, brother. A long time no talk to you. But yeah, I could be found on Twitter, JRATM23, or you can actually on Instagram too. Same handle. Typically, you can find a bunch of videos from the fights I go to. That's pretty much what I use it for. So yeah, if you wanna hit me up, you can reach me there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob, who was, as we said earlier in the show, he was in the building for Charlo's rematch stoppage win over Castano. I go to you, certainly last but not least, I'll go to you, Daniel, from Four Boxing News, as well as DN Squirrel. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially as it pertains to the Miami Heat, who, as I said, uh, have stormed back in this game. They're currently playing game one of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics. They were down double digits in the first half, and yeah, 30-point turnaround as they're currently up by 20 right now in the fourth quarter. Uh, Pretty amazing stuff we're seeing here, Daniel. But anyway, I know you've been having one eye on that. For those who want to talk sweet science, wrestling, Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes. Now, speaking of basketball, I do have to make my customary fuck Steve Javy. But like I say, you can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99, RAWKUZ99. Definitely catch me there. Like I said, Musk hasn't banned us yet. Granted, he might not be able to ban us if Tesla stock keeps dropping the way it is.
Yeah, indeed. Before I get my information, I want to say condolences to the lives that were lost as a result of that horrific, heinous, and I will go out and say, act of domestic terrorism, act of racism, act of white domestic terrorism that took place in Buffalo over the last 2 weeks. As those in the U.S. know, senseless act of violence that took place. 10 people lost their lives as some young punk just went off on a shooting spree. This was one event in what was a series of mass shootings that took place all over the United States over the past weekend. And on the behalf, you may give a word on this, Gail, Daniel, Jacob, if you want, but yeah, just personally for me, I just want, before I go through my spiel of where to check me out, I just personally want to give thoughts and prayers to the family, to the friends of those who lost their lives in that senseless act of racialized violence in Buffalo, New York over the past weekend. I know there are folks that we follow, that we know, Gail and Daniel specifically, who are from that area, from that Buffalo area, and they're hurting as everyone is as a result of what went down, that the tragedy that took place. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness with me, you know what it is on the socials. Brother JR76 on Twitter, Brother JRSC on IG. As I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all things pound for pound boxing report, you can do so. The site blog page p4pboxingreport.com. Again, if you want to email us, you can do so, p4pboxing@p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you'll find the links to where to find us all over the social media, Facebook /Meta, link to the YouTube page, IG, Tumblr, links to where you can donate, Cash Me and PayPal donation links to where you can find us all over podcast platforms, as well as links to Beachbody on demand. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Alimkhanuly in his fight against Dignum, Jamel Herring in his fight against Jamaine Ortiz. We will also recap David Benavidez, David Lemieux, Joshua Buatsi, Craig Richards, as well as Chantelle Cameron and Victoria Bustos. And one of Gail's favorite fighters, Alan Babbage, as well. Iffy fights happening. Don't know what's going to happen on the weekend of. Oh, yes, we do know. Also a preview of. Excuse me, I got my schedules messed up. Do a preview of heated rivalry, heated matchup between Gervonta Tank Davis and Rolly Romero. That's going to happen in NYC on Showtime pay-per-view. On the undercard of that, Eris Landa, he makes his return to the ring against Gary Russell. Also in and around that time, Otto Wallin is fighting Rydell Booker. I believe that fight is still on. So we will talk about those fights. So again, for Gail from Communities Digital News, NY Fights, Jacob of Jab Hook Boxing, Daniel from For Boxing News, and the Inscriber. I want to once again thank everybody for a lively commentary in the live chat. For Gail, for Jacob, for Daniel, this is Michael, episode 263 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening, good night, and again, condolences to everyone, to loved ones and family of the lost lives in Buffalo, New York.